Just want to bring in our panel who are still with us, Kelly Hyman and Joe Moreno. Joe, to you first. We touched on it at the start of the programme, but I mean, Donald Trump does things quite deliberately. Why do you think it was that he jumped to start talking about this in that press conference where he was holding a moment of silence and expressing condolences?
Well, it's clear that this is an issue he is absolutely going to go to war over, right? I mean, my guess is on Wednesday night, Donald Trump already got wind that some people were blaming him that the cuts to government were responsible for this crash. And I think he probably came out the next morning determined he was going to punch back hard. Mm-hmm. I don't love the fact that he jumped to that conclusion so quickly. I mean, this absolutely needs to be investigated thoroughly and transparently. But I think a lot of Americans do support the notion that those buzzwords of diversity, equity, inclusion are sort of code words for something other than merit. That's what I think most Americans support, is selection that is merit-based only, and that is colorblind, and that is gender blind. And once you start inserting those noble and yet kind of non-merit-based attributes to try to get to some diversity goal that is never actually defined, but is aspirational, people don't like that. And so I think with Donald Trump, his timing may have been poor, but he is touching on an issue that I think many Americans are now finally free to say that we don't believe in non-merit-based systems. It's a country based on equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome.
But you've just heard Gina explain there that they are merit-based. That's the whole point of these policies, is to expand the pool of people who can apply and stop things being so closed off.
But how exactly is that being done? I mean, why would someone who is other than white and male not be able to go after the same opportunities that a white male can? I mean, these jobs are posted on USA Jobs. I mean, that's how people apply for them. And people are interviewed and vetted and selected based on the quality of their background and their skills. Mm-hmm. So once you start injecting these subjective attributes about why we think that a minority individual is better for a job based on an otherwise better qualified non-minority individual, people recoil from that. It is very un-American. Remember, we have the greatest story in history here. We have the African-American son of a single mother who worked hard, went to the top schools, and became the president of the United States. And so that's what we should celebrate, not this idea of injecting some kind of a system to kind of fight back against something called, like structural racism that I've heard. That is something.
Okay, well, let's. What do you think, Joe? U.S. taking back the Panama Canal?
Katrina, there was a slogan that was kicked around the Reagan White House, which was basically, it said, we built it, we paid for it, it's ours. And that sort of simplifies things. But yes, Donald Trump has sort of fixated on it, partially because of the fees that are charged. And I could see that being a small win if the fees that were charged of American vessels were backed off. But I think this really is about China, as you touched on a little earlier. I mean, China has not been shy that its 100-year goal by 2049 is to be on par with America in terms of economy, military, technologically, in all cases. And so I think China has been very determined to dominate the Indo-Pacific. It has made inroads into the Middle East, into Africa. And the perception here now that they're right in our backyard, that they have an outsized role in perhaps managing the canal, I think that's too far. And so I think that if that's true, I can see that really being the driving factor to say this is too close to home, we're going to push back, and we want to see some more control, if not by the Panamanians to benefit the Panamanian people, then by America.
And is that concern about China and Chinese movements around Panama the same concern that's leading to the remarks we heard from President Trump about Greenland as well, Joe?
Yes. I mean, it's not about their oil and natural resources. It's about their strategic location. I mean, it's all about what America can benefit from strategically in terms of defending itself against China and Russia. It's a legitimate claim. We already have a very good relationship with Greenland, so I'm not sure how much more we get from the sort of posturing about making them a state or a territory. But certainly anything that we do to increase our military support and our presence in Greenland and improve that relationship is a good thing.
Okay, well, we'll be talking a bit more about foreign policy in just a moment. What visitor the president chooses to have first, what world leader. So let's talk about this with our panel. Democratic strategist Kelly Hyman is still with us, former federal prosecutor Joe Moreno, and Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, former ambassador, is with us now as well. Just want to get all of your views on the fact that it will be Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the first foreign leader coming to visit in the White House. Kelly, what do you think?
I'm not surprised at all when you look at it from a strategy standpoint, and you also look at it who you've aligned with in the past. So I definitely do not see that as being any surprise, but one hopes always that there is peace in the Middle East and there some type of resolution, because what goes on in the Middle East affects all of us, not only in the Middle East, but abroad.
And Joe, what about you?
Well, I think I would say that there's many, many, many things to criticize Donald Trump on. But this fixation by the American political left to kind of hang on this sort of Nazi, Hitler, fascist label to him, I mean, it's really grotesque, because Donald Trump has probably been the best American president, friend to Israel in modern history. The fact that he has imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court, which harassed Benjamin Netanyahu, his executive order to better vet Hamas sympathizers and students on campuses that harass Jews here in America. So I think that really it's not surprising at all. And I think people really, really don't like this sort of smear that the left imposes on him. They really should stop that. It's not at all benefiting their cause. And I think it's fantastic that Donald Trump is advancing this very strong alliance America has with Israel.
Joe, do you think this issue, this turning this ceasefire deal into something more permanent and more long-term, is something that President Trump can achieve during his term?
Well, let's hope so, because he will also be judged on top of the economy. He'll be judged on his boasts about dealing with the situation in Ukraine as well as the West Bank. I'll agree with Kelly in terms of the right to speak out is absolute, and it absolutely should be respected in this country. And it's also not a time to point fingers politically. However, I do think it is a time to call right and wrong in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, Hamas's activities are grotesque, and the fact that they are building themselves around hospitals and schools, and what they've done to the Jewish people is absolutely absurd. And so I do think that there are times to say both sides have a point, and then there are times to call out right and wrong. And in this case, the right is on the side of Israel, and the absolute wrong is on the side of Hamas in Gaza.
Trump promised a blitz, and it's been another week of executive orders to add to the 33 that he signed last week. This is a list here, scrolling through some of those policies that President Trump has announced. Not time on the programme for me to read them all out. As you can see, there are very, very many of them. So let's get a final word with our panel tonight. Kelly and Joe are here. Some of the standout moments of the week. Joe Moreno, what's been your highlight of President Trump's second week?
Katrina, sometimes Donald Trump is his own worst enemy in terms of how he says things and when he says them. But it's hard you can't deny the incredible contrast that we've seen in the last 2 weeks in terms of his accessibility to the media. His willingness to stand there and answer questions is in such remarkable difference from what we're used to the last 4 years, where we had, let's face it, barely a sentient president who can hardly read off a teleprompter, and a vice president who could barely put a few sentences together. And so you might not always like what he says, but the fact that he's willing to get up there and be grilled is such a refreshing change, and really what we need in America right now.
Okay, well, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden would not agree with your assessment of them, but I take your point there. Kelly, Joe, can he keep up this pace?
I think he's determined to. Remember, most presidents entering a second term are lame ducks from day one. He's determined not to do that. And he has the wisdom and the benefit of having done this before and of having 4 years to kind of plan what to do. So those executive orders, they weren't done the night before he was inaugurated. Those were done in the 3 months between the election and inauguration date. And so I think you will see a flurry of activity for as long as he can sustain it. He is determined to make his mark. He considers himself ascendant. He considers the conservative movement ascendant right now. So I think he will keep his foot on the gas for as long as he possibly can.
Well, we might have to extend this 1 hour a day of discussion into 5 hours a day then to get through everything that he does. But we're out of time for today, so we'll leave it there. Joe Moreno, former federal prosecutor, and Kelly Hyman, Democratic strategist. Thanks as always for joining us here on BBC News. And thanks to you at home for watching as well. I'm Katrina Perry. Do take care.